Hello again, welcome back. In this video I will be making the fourth page. It's very similar to the first page. They're exactly the same. The only difference is that that this one, the waterfall is gonna be sideways. I'll be using the last piece from sheet number 1 for this, and I want to add a pocket over here, so I am gonna cut in the green leaves on the other side. So I'm gonna find my ruler and my knife, and I am just gonna take off a small piece of my knife so I have a new sharp piece. If you use a dull blade, there is a chance that your knife is gonna rip the paper instead of just cutting it. And I'm just making sure that I am cutting the right place. So I am gonna take my ruler and I am measuring 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And here is my head again in the frame, and I'm sorry about that, but I have to make sure that I get this right. And I am using the measurements on the ruler on both sides as well, so I'm sure that I don't cut more than I need to. I am cutting 1/8 of an inch from both sides. And I am being really careful here with the first one because there is not much for the ruler to hold on to. So I could just as easily push my paper and then it probably wouldn't be cut where I want it to. And of course I am cutting against the metal side on the ruler. And I want there to be 1/2 inch between each line. So the next line is gonna be at 5/8. And I really am sorry about my head being in the frame all the time, but at least I hope you enjoy my messy mama bun. In the future, I promise I will try my best to keep my head out of the frame, so you guys also have a chance to see what I'm doing. I'm now cutting at 1 1/8. And again, I am making sure that I don't go over 1/8 of an inch from the sides. And I am cutting the next line here at 1 5/8. But the ruler only goes to 1 1/2, so I am measuring from the other lines I've already made. And remember that there should be 1/2 inch between each line. And I'm sorry that you don't actually get to see me cut the last line, but it should be at 2 1/8 from the edge of the paper. And just making sure that all of them is cut all the way through. So now it's time to ink the edges. So I'm gonna find my ink and my ink tool, and I am gonna go all around. I'm just doing this so the white on the edge doesn't stand out too much. So I'm not actually inking on the design. I know some of you asked me about that. It is just so that the paper doesn't look like it's actually been cut. I'm gonna put this aside for now, and I'm gonna get my paper cutter. And I'm gonna get started on all of the flaps for the waterfall. I spoke to my mom today, and she saw my videos and said that she really liked them, but then she told me that these sheets of cardstock that I'm using now probably don't have the same measurements as the one in the US. So I asked a friend of mine who lives in the US what is the measurements of your cardstock. And she told me that they measure 8.5 by 11 inches. And in Denmark, they measure 8.25 by 11.75. So there is a small difference. It shouldn't matter that much because I am cutting down most of the paper. But I am gonna keep it in mind for the future. I'm gonna cut 5 pieces down to 5.75 by 4.25. I'm using my Tim Holst paper trimmer. It can cut a couple of layers at once, but if you add too many, it's just gonna push your paper instead of cutting it, and then it's gonna get crooked. I now need to score all of my pieces for the waterfall. So I'm gonna take out my scoreboard and I'm gonna score all of them at 3.75. You might have to score the same line a couple of times, and you don't wanna do it too hard. If you do it too hard and only go over it once, there's a chance that you'll go through the paper instead of scoring it. So you want to do it slowly and give the fibers in the paper a chance to move the way you want. That's also the reason why if you make the cover, for example, you want to go over the small space between the chipboard with your bone folder and kind of soften it up before you bend it. So if you do that, the paper won't rip when you close your album. Now I'm gonna fold all of my pieces at the score lines. And as you can see, I am just using my finger to press it down before I go in with my bone folder. And that is also to prevent the paper from tearing. I'm using my media mat again to make sure that it's gonna fold exactly where I want it to fold. The score lines of a scoreboard is usually 1/16 of an inch wide. So when you use 5 pieces, if they're not all scored or folded the exact same spot, then you'll be able to see it when it's assembled. And as you may have found out by now, it's really important to me that it's as straight as possible. Of course, everything doesn't have to be perfect because it is handmade. But if you can prevent it from being crooked or uneven, then why wouldn't you? Okay, so I now have all of my 5 pieces ready to go into the lines we cut. And here I am again, making sure that they're all the same size. When I'm putting these in, I am being super careful not to tear the sides of my Stamperia paper. But if you do, you could just piece it back together with a piece of score tape in the back. You just need your score tape to be 1/8 of an inch wide. And in the first page I made, it was the same way as this one. I tore mine and I taped it back together, and you couldn't even see it. I'm gonna try to explain this the best I can. You want your fold to be on the front of your paper. If they end up in the back of your paper, then all of the pieces won't be able to flip without tearing the Stamperia. I hope that makes sense to you. I'm gonna show you when I'm done putting all of these in. Then I'm just gonna show you what I mean. I'm gonna flip this to see if I need to pull some of the pieces down a little. And I can see that I need to pull down the bottom piece. Now I'm going through all of the pieces to see if the folds ended up in the back of the paper or if they are still in the front. If they were in the back, then I wouldn't be able to flip through these so easily. And I'm also just making sure that they follow a straight line. And then while I'm holding on to all of the pieces, I'm gonna flip this around again. And now I can glue all of them down to the back side of the paper. If you prefer to use score tape, you could use that instead, but I prefer to use glue because it's faster and it's a little cheaper than score tape. So I only use the score tape when I have to cover a big surface. This glue I'm using, it dries pretty quickly. So if you use this on a big surface, then the first glue I would add, it would probably be dry by the time I was done adding all of the glue. Now, before I continue, I am just gonna add a piece of score tape on each side. So I don't accidentally tear the paper while I am adding the closure strap in a minute. And I'm going as close to the edge as possible. I'm sorry if you hear any loud noises. My upstairs neighbors are moving out and you can hear everything in this apartment. I love living here, but it's not exactly soundproof. I also live above a restaurant, and there's this one spot in our apartment, and it's right above their bar, and right in that spot, the floors are so thin that you could hear everything they say. It doesn't really bother us, and of course we can be a little loud sometimes as well. And they always try to keep it down in that end of the apartment where they know our kids are sleeping. But now I am gonna cover up the top of the waterfall, and I'm gonna use the last piece of sheet number 7, and I am gonna cut out the birdcage. And I want the birdcage to be in the center of the first waterfall flap. So I'm gonna try to cut around the birdcage. So now I am just trying to figure out how much I have to cut off. This piece is 6¼ from side to side and 6 inches from top to bottom. So I'm gonna start by turning the piece upside down, and I am gonna cut it at 5�3/8. And then I'm gonna turn it back around and cut it at 3½ And remember to save all of your scraps because you might be able to use them later. I want this piece to be 5½ inches, so I am gonna cut off 1/4 inch from each end. So now that it fits, I'm gonna make the closure strap that's gonna hold it all together. But first, I'm just gonna ink the edges of my birdcage paper so I don't forget before I glue it on. And I have to add my magnets before I can do that. So I'm just gonna put my page aside for now and get started on the closure. And I'm just gonna use one of the small pieces from my scraps, and I'm cutting it down to 1 3/8 by 5 inches. I'm not gonna put my paper trimmer too far away. I'm taking sheet number 4, and I'm gonna use the border on top, so I am just gonna cut that off. And I'm just using my scissors for this because I am gonna cut the border in smaller pieces anyway. And this doesn't have to be perfect at all because we're gonna trim off all of the excess from the cutout page. And I'm gonna cut 2 pieces of this border. And I'm cutting both of them at 5 inches. And like I said, I'm now gonna cut off the excess, and that should be at 1 1/4 inch. And I'm of course doing that on both of them. Now I'm not gonna use my paper trimmer anymore, so I could just put that away and take out my oxide so I can start inking the edges. You don't have to do the ends, you could just do the sides, because we're not gonna be able to see the ends anyway. And then I can glue them onto my strap, one for each side. And again, if you prefer to use squirt tape for this, you can do that. But if you do use glue, you just have to be careful that you don't use too much. And I'm going in with my bone folder to burnish it. And now I can glue the other piece on the other side. And I'm going as close to the edge as I can with the glue, and then filling it in the middle. And when I'm placing it, I make sure that there's a little bit of the white cardstock sticking out from both sides. But the ends doesn't matter because, like I said, we won't be able to see them. And I am burnishing again with my bone folder. To make sure that I get all of the air out from underneath. And then I'm using my cloth to wipe off any excess glue. And remember also to wipe off your media mat if there is glue on that as well. I'm going to use my scoreboard, and I'm going to score this at 4 inches and again at 4 1/8. And I am really working my way through all of the 3 layers. And then I am slowly gonna start folding my strap, and again do it slowly and carefully so you don't rip your paper. It might be a little hard to see, but I'm pressing it just under the fold. And now it's ready to be glued onto the page. I'm just gonna peel off just a little bit of these anti-sticky things on the squirt tape. And I'm also gonna add a little piece of squirt tape on my strap. I want to use squirt tape for this, so it's gonna stick to the page immediately. I think I'm gonna add another piece along the edge. Again, as close to the edge as possible. And don't forget to burnish so that you're sure that it's not gonna come off before you glue in the page. Now I'm removing these anti-sticky things. It can be a struggle sometimes. And now I just have to place it in the middle of my page. And I am going to use the media mat to guide me. Make sure to place your page right underneath the fold and glue it down as soon as you are ready. I am measuring to make sure the strap is in the middle of the front as well. And if it's not, it might be because the fold is a little crooked, and then you could just adjust it a little and manipulate it with your bone folder. But this one is straight, so I am gonna burnish and turn it around and burnish again. Now I want to add a magnet on top of the first flap, and I'm gonna place it right next to the end of my strap. So I'm gonna take a small piece of score tape and add it right under the strap. Burnish with my bone folder, and then I can peel off the anti-sticky thing and then add my magnet. Be sure to press it down so it's not gonna come off. And then I'm ready to glue down my birdcage paper. I'm just checking to see if it still fits, and lucky for me, it didn't shrink. So I can add my glue. Again, I am going as close to the edge as possible, and then I'm gonna fill in the rest. Then I can place it on my waterfall on top of the magnet. I am gonna burnish, but I'm only going over the edges with my bone folder. And then I'm gonna use my cloth for the rest of it. But first I'm just taking off the excess glue. If you do use a bone folder around your magnet, it's gonna make a sharp edge because you're gonna press down your paper too hard. And then you'll be able to see where the magnet is, and we wanna keep that hidden. Now I need something to cover up the other magnet, and I am just gonna take it and place it on top of the other so I know where it is. And I'm gonna find sheet number 5, and I'm gonna cut out these 2 small clogs. I'm just gonna cut off this small piece from the sheet, and then I'm gonna use my die cutter to cut out the circles. Of course, if you don't have circle dies, you could just use your scissors. I just think that it's a little hard to cut out small circles if you use scissors. But again, it is handmade, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm gonna go with this clock on the front, so I am just gonna glue it onto some cardstock that I found in my scraps. But of course I am just inking the edges first, and the other one as well. It doesn't have to be a big piece. It just have to be big enough so that you can still see some of the white cardstock underneath the clock. So this piece is perfect, and I'm adding my glue. So now I can put it on my cardstock, and I'm gonna go in with my cloth to press it down and remove the excess. And now I am using my scissors because I don't have a circle die in the right size. And I want the white cardstock to show, so I'm gonna leave about 1/8 of an inch around the clock. And as I said, it's really hard to get a straight circle when you're using scissors. So I'm just going around again to cut off some small pieces that are sticking out. Now I can place it on my strap, so I'm just gonna add a small piece of squirt tape onto my magnet and take off the anti-sticky part. And I am just checking to see how much I am gonna cover with glue. And be sure not to use too much because you can always add some more. But it's hard to remove it when it's already there. And now I am gonna place the clock on top and make sure that it's right where I want it to be. So say hello to my head again. I'm just pressing down on the magnet to make sure that it's gonna stick to my tape. And then I'm gonna open it up and press on the part with the glue. And I'm just checking to see if it works. And it does. Lucky. So now I am gonna take the other clock and place on the other side. And I am covering all of the clock with the glue. And then I'm gonna add it to the back side of the other clock on top of my magnet. And I'm just eyeballing it. As long as 12 is up, I think it's good. And I'm gonna use my cloth again to kind of go around the magnet and around the edges. Sometimes my son sounds like one of those squeaky toys that you give to dogs. He is really cute when he's sleeping. So now the page is basically done. I'm just gonna go and add a little more glue underneath the clock. And as you can see, I maybe used a little too much, but that's okay. I'm just gonna wipe it off. But I'm gonna open it up first so I don't get any glue on the rest of my page. I once used baby wipes to remove my excess glue, but I quickly found out that that is not the best idea. So here it is, the finished page. Now we just need to cover it with squirt tape and put it into the album. I am gonna add some strips of the Stamperia paper to all of the other pieces in the waterfall, and I'm also gonna add a little pocket underneath the waterfall. But I wanted to wait until I was done with all of the pages and inserts so I could use my scraps instead of just cutting into a big piece. So now I'm gonna add my glue, and I have to work fast here so my glue doesn't dry before I can put it into the album. And remember to leave the same amount of space around the page. Now, if your album didn't turn out the exact way that you wanted it to, remember that you are the only one who's gonna know. I always say that as a scrapper, you don't make mistakes, you just make other decisions. And I have made a lot of other decisions. Now remember to burnish your page, and when you're doing this, it's important that you go over everything. You don't want to miss a single spot on the page. So now the fourth and final page is done. In my last video of this tutorial, I will be making the insert for the big pocket and also some small booklets. And then I'm gonna add some final details. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are enjoying my tutorial.